Hello everyone, my name is Pauline Cullen and in this video I'm going to talk about how to score Band 7 or above in the IELTS test. People often say to me, I've taken the IELTS test many times and keep getting Band 6 or Band 6.5, but I need Band 7. Why can't I get Band 7? The most common problem seems to be in trying to achieve Band 7 in the writing test, and people often become very frustrated at their lack of progress. Some common strategies people use to prepare for the test are to keep taking the test over and over again. Their thinking is that maybe this time I'll be lucky and get a different score. This is both very expensive and very frustrating. Another common strategy is to keep doing lots of practice tests. That's less expensive, but it can be just as frustrating. And the lack of progress often means people start looking for tricks and shortcuts to use. Some of the typical shortcuts people use are things like trying to guess answers to the reading and listening test questions before doing any reading or listening, or looking for patterns, so saying things like, I haven't put C yet, so that must be the answer. With the speaking and writing tests, some people learn whole answers or sentences and expect to be able to use them in the test. And there are many videos online telling you that you simply need to learn a special list of complex words or use certain grammatical structures to magically get a Band 9 score. Let's look at why these strategies don't work. Firstly, authentic IELTS test materials are very carefully written. You won't find silly options that you can dismiss easily using common sense. You won't find any patterns. The IELTS test is a gold standard for a very good reason, so you will not be able to guess the answer without listening or reading carefully. If you learn answers for the writing test, then you are guaranteeing that you will not score Band 7. In fact, you're unlikely to score Band 5 or more, depending on how much natural writing you actually manage to show. You can't trick the examiner into believing you are a higher band than you actually are. Some people believe complex language means producing very long sentences with as many long words as possible. The result isn't complex language, it's complicated language that's very difficult to follow. It's easy to see where this idea of complex language comes from. If you look at the official IELTS website or the IELTS exam booklet, then you'll see that a Band 6 candidate is someone who can use and understand fairly complex language, while a Band 7 candidate generally handles complex language well. So it's easy to see why people might think, that means I need to write in a complex way to score Band 7. In this image, I've tried to show how the writing task assessment actually works. Let's take the example of a Writing Task 2 essay. I've used the idea of a wall to suggest the task, and the different colours represent each individual element of the task, from the introduction to the body paragraphs and finally the conclusion. The individual bricks in the wall represent the language used. So a Band 9 candidate, who is an expert user of English, presents a well-balanced, well-structured task and is able to skillfully control language. Band 8 and Band 7 candidates also complete the task well and produce a well-balanced essay. In the Band 7 answer, the structure is not always as successful as the Band 8 answer, and there are more language control problems. But overall, this is a strong answer. If you're Band 6, then the problems you have are in terms of overall structure as well as language. Some parts of the task are not as fully addressed as others. The ideas are sometimes repetitive, and notice that the different elements are not always logically organised. The argument is also unclear at times, and I've shown this with gaps in the structure. And this is where the examiner gets a little lost in your argument. This can be because Band 6 and 6.5 candidates often try to use complex words and phrases as a quick fix to fill in the gaps in their language. You can see from this image that these don't improve the overall structure, and they don't change the level of the writing. In fact, they often get in the way. Let's look at why learning complete answers doesn't work. I often use the analogy of cooking to help explain this. So let's imagine that the writing task is to create a dish that will show your cooking skills. To the examiner, a learned answer looks like this. Just like a person who opens a can of soup is not showing any cooking skills, people who give a learned answer aren't showing any writing skills. The examiner is an expert, and just as a chef would easily taste that this is soup from a can and not made from fresh ingredients, the examiner can very easily spot a learned answer. Learning whole sentences to cut and paste into your answers will also not magically lift your score. These sentences stand out very clearly within your answer. If you're using any of these strategies, repeatedly taking tests and trying to learn answers or lists of complex words to use, then this is why you're stuck at band 6 or 6.5. You're going round in circles and not making any real progress. You need to take a different approach. It's important to see IELTS like a GPS, telling you where you are in your language learning. The only way to make genuine progress and increase your score is to improve your language skills. So the first thing I recommend is knowing exactly what language skills you're being tested on. You need to know which skills are being tested so that you can master these skills. There are many different question types in the exam. In the reading test, for example, there are 11 different types, each testing a different reading subskill. You have to get more than 30 out of 40 questions right to get a band 7. So you'll only achieve a higher score if you've mastered the different reading subskills that are being tested in those questions. I wrote the skills section of the official Cambridge Guide to IELTS with this in mind. There are a total of 28 different units showing you the different skills being tested in each part of the test. The second thing that I would recommend is to learn language, and it's a good idea to begin by thinking about your own language. How do you communicate in a precise and accurate way in your language? That is what IELTS is asking you to do in English. Think about different tenses in your language. How do you show when something happened or is happening? How do you show that ideas are connected to each other? For example, how do you show that two ideas are similar or that there is a contrast? Thinking about your own language will help to form a strong foundation for your language learning. Try to see yourself as gathering together language blocks that you will then be able to use. But it's important to know which language blocks to learn, which to use when, and which words go naturally together. I've written 2 vocabulary books for IELTS. These look at vocabulary connected to different topics and teach you the words in the context of IELTS reading and listening texts, and then show you how to actively use the words in the context of the speaking and writing tests. Another of my books, Common Mistakes at IELTS Intermediate, looks at the most common mistakes made by IELTS candidates at bands 5 and 6 in the writing test. Just how important is vocabulary for band 7? Well, it's important to see vocabulary in 2 ways. Your passive vocabulary is the vocabulary you can understand in the reading and listening texts, and this is usually the greatest. Your active vocabulary consists of the words you are able to produce fluently and accurately in the writing and speaking tests, and it's generally a lot smaller than your passive knowledge. And that's why you sometimes struggle to remember a word that you need in the writing or speaking test. The public version of the IELTS band descriptors tells us that for band 7, you need to have a sufficient range of vocabulary to allow you to be flexible and precise. This means that no matter what the topic is, you have sufficient vocabulary to explain your meaning with some precision and accuracy. A lot of people try to learn the academic word list when they're preparing for IELTS. The academic word list was produced by Dr. Avril Coxhead of Victoria University in New Zealand. It's a wonderful resource that's freely available online. Avril's list gives the words most commonly used in academic writing and organises them according to their frequency. It's an excellent resource for English for academic purposes and for the listening and reading tests, and I highly recommend it. However, the list does not cover normal everyday topic areas, and this is what the IELTS test will ask you to talk about or write about, often in an abstract way. This screen shows an academic writing task question that I recently posted on my IELTS Weekly Facebook page. You can see that it's a bar chart with data about household expenses for some very common topics such as food, transport, and so on. This image shows some feedback I gave to one of my followers after an exercise I posted about the bar chart. The writing in the box at the top is the original post and my feedback is below. And if you read carefully, then you can see that it is the topic of money and household expenses that causes the language problems, not the academic language. So if you're aiming for Band 7 in IELTS, you need to make sure that you have a sufficiently wide active vocabulary to allow you to be precise and accurate in a variety of topics. I developed my vocabulary teaching app with this in mind. I studied languages at high school and at university. To learn new vocabulary, I'd collect a list of useful words and sit on the bus learning them, and that's what I wanted to recreate with this app. It has 25 different topics that are common in IELTS, and there are 10 words in each topic. The words that stay in your active vocabulary are the words that you see often and use often. So the app takes you through 10 separate reading, listening, and writing exercises to help you practice and develop your active vocabulary, and to help you to remember the words when you need them in the test. Test practice is also a very important part of your IELTS preparation. The official guide to IELTS is divided into two halves. The first half is the skills section, and the second half contains 8 complete practice tests. This is the official Cambridge Guide, and these test materials were written by the people who write the IELTS test, so they're a very good way to practice and improve your timing and confidence. Once you've studied the skills that you need to use, make sure that you consciously use them in the test. Don't fall back on bad habits in a test situation. It's especially important to communicate clearly and naturally in the test if you want to achieve a Band 7 score. So remember that complex language is not the same as complicated language. If you have any questions about IELTS or about my app or any of my books, then you can contact me on Twitter, on my IELTS Weekly Facebook page, or on my website.